Good afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar event. My name is Joshua. I'm going to be your presenter today. I hope everybody can hear me okay. It's promptly 12 noon Eastern Time here, and we're going to go ahead and get started. We're here to talk about some payroll check printing options, and it's really not about printing checks today. It's about some reprinting options, renumbering options, but things that certainly have to do with payroll checks themselves. Before we get into our topic, though, a few technical things before we get started. We're going to be here till no later than 12:20 Eastern Time. This topic is not terribly long. We may not even go the full 20 minutes. Thank you very much in advance for attending. We are recording today's webinar event, so we will have this out on the Support Center page at our website within the next 24 to 48 hours or so, maybe sooner, maybe even as soon as this afternoon. If you have questions, please type those into the questions portion of the webinar control panel for me. I will do my best to keep an eye on those, and I'm pretty good at repeating the question for everyone's benefit, and then we'll see what we can't do to get those answered. Please keep the questions on topic, which means it's about either reprinting checks, check stubs, renumbering payroll checks, what have you, our topic at hand. Also, our topic is taken from our P101 workbook, pages 36 to 41. So if you have the P101 workbook, you can follow along with the printed material that I'm using for today's webinar event by turning to those pages in the workbook. And so let's go ahead and get started. So on page 36, it talks about reprinting check stubs, okay? So from time to time, an employee may come to you and request a copy of one of their check, payroll check. And sometimes it even occurs, like somebody's I've even heard situations historically where somebody's, like you've got an employee who's requesting, applying for a home mortgage, and the underwriter or the bank or the loan company wants a copy of their pay stubs back 2 years or a year or what have you. And so this reprint check stubs option that we have in payroll is really nice and suitable for that, to make this occur. Okay, and so how we do that is we click under reports, and then right down here at the very bottom we see the option that says reprint check stubs. Okay, so when we click on that, and of course I can always go back under, say, system administration, system profile, and change it back to a different payroll year, to run payroll checks for a different payroll year. Let's go ahead and do that just to show you that it can be done. So when I go back to reports and reprint check stubs, I'm now asking to reprint check stubs back in my 2019 payroll year, okay, which you can certainly do, all right? If you do not choose specific employee slash contractor here and select a specific employee that you want the check stubs to be reprinted for, it is going to reprint the check stubs for all of your employees on a particular pay date, okay? So if I go to all employees slash contractors and click next, it asks me to enter a particular pay date, and so I'm pretty sure I've got stuff in here for pretty good about doing mid-month and in there. So then if I put in a particular pay period, a pay date from and to, and it will of course include all the pay stubs within a particular expanded period. So if you've got, you want to print a multiple paychecks for stubs for folks for multiple periods, you can enter a date range of dates. It doesn't have to be one. But if I choose a particular pay date here and click and continue, notice it's now listing all of the employees that I printed checks for or had checks for that particular day, not just one. And I can't choose and check just one employee here, okay? So it would print all of them. So once I go to next, it then opens up a preview of the report first and allows me to reprint a stub for all of my employees for that day, okay? But let's say I did have a particular employee who did want a series of check stubs, again, for they're applying for a loan. So let's say I do a specific employee, I do clear all, I ask for Jimmy Hilliard, I go to next, I can now go ahead and enter a range of dates here. So let's say maybe 01/01 2019 through 12/31. We want, again, for his loan to be able to print and have verifiable stubs for the entire year. I click continue. It shows me here's Jimmy with all of the pay dates that he had checks printed or we had paid him. And then when I click print, it then opens up pages 1 of 5 at the top and shows me and allows me to reprint a check stub for each one of the pay dates that he had received checks for in 2019. I could do one date or I can do a range of dates. It's entirely your choice. It's certainly quicker if you need multiples, if you do a range of dates, but you have literally, folks, full control over what dates you reprint those stubs for and for which employees those stubs are printed, okay? And of course, I would just print those to plain paper. It does say non-negotiable copy. It's not like they can take this to the bank. There's no bank or counter routing number information on this check, on these stubs, but it is important that the employee be reminded that it is not a negotiable copy or check of the checks, okay? So that's how easy it is to reprint check stubs. Now, with this being said, I do want to point out, and this is really important, is we get this call through our support line a lot, and it's basically somebody, a user calls us from a church and says, hey, all I need to do is reprint a new check for an employee. They lost their check, so I need to print a new check. That there is no option in payroll, folks, to just simply go in and reprint a paycheck, okay? You'd have to go into payroll, void individual pay, void that check, or we have to go in and handle it all in accounting depending on the age of the original check that you're needing to reprint for. But it is important to know that there is no option to, while we do have a reprint checks option and we have a renumber checks feature that we're going to talk about now, there is no function in payroll that simply allows us to go in and print a new check for an employee with a new check number, okay? And so I'm getting a question, can you reprint a check stub for someone who was paid via EFT? That is a great question, Sue. So yes, I know I've got some folks that are entered that have EFT set up in 2020, so let's go in and do that for some of our employees there. Great question. So we're going to do our January 15th pay date, go to next. We notice here, let me get out my highlighter and draw some focus here. It says EFT ACH, with a date on it right there, okay, or EFT information on it. So those are my folks that were paid via direct deposit. So yes, when I go to next, that is including the pay stubs for my folks who were paid electronically. And so those EFT folks can have check stubs reprinted as well. Great question. Okay, so we're moving on to page 38 on our workbook, talking about renumbering checks, okay? The payroll module includes a function under the payroll button there, the payroll menu right here at the very bottom that says, or about halfway down, called Renumber Checks, okay? So for some reason maybe we had handwritten checks or something, manual checks, and we simply produce those checks or handwrite those checks, and we're wanting to produce stubs from our payroll system, but we need to make sure that those check numbers are assigned properly in accounting for bank reconciliation purposes. And maybe when we posted our payroll, we weren't paying attention and we assigned the wrong check numbers to the checks in our payroll system, and we need to fix that, okay? So as the heading or the bold text at the top of page 38 indicates, important, this process will reverse and re-enter transactions in accounting, as well as changing the check register and the check numbers in the payroll system, okay? It may be advisable that you make a backup of both your church windows and your payroll data before you use this Renumber Checks routine. It's an option. It's your choice. You don't have to, but it might be just advisable to go in and go to System Admin, go to Backup Data, make a backup of your payroll data, go into a church windows and make a backup of your church windows data as well, because again, there's, other than, you can certainly go back and renumber the checks back, you know, if necessary, if you need to, but you would have to go in and renumber them to get the check numbers back, and then you're creating a whole bunch of reverse transactions in addition to that. So it might be advisable just to make a backup that you can restore if necessary. But when we're ready and we've done that, we would go into Payroll and Renumber Checks, and then it asks us which pay date are we renumbering our checks for. It's always going to default to the most recent pay date in our menu up here. And so let's say we're going to backdate this to March 31st. So one of our checks or our series of checks were wrong back under March 31st. And, you know, we're realizing that. We're reconciling our bank statement. So we need to renumber those to fix those. The amounts are right. The check numbers are wrong. Okay. So unlike the other previous, when our reprinting check stubs, I don't have an option to choose who I want to reprint them for, except I can here choose one employee, or per my Microsoft conventions, I can hold down my control key and select random records, okay? Or I can go up and do select all. So you have full control using, you know, deciding which one of your checks need to be renumbered, okay? So if I needed to renumber them all, I would just do select all. If I needed to renumber one, I would choose whichever employee needed to be renumbered. Or again, if I had a random select list of employees that were wrong, I would use my control key and select those names only. Okay? Your choice, full control. So we're going to assume that they were all out of sequence. Okay? So let's say maybe they were one off, and you know Jimmy was actually 11,564. So we're going to do clear all and then select all, and then we're going to go to next. And so it brings up all of our employees that we have selected. So we're up here, we do our starting check numbers. So we're going to say, okay, 11564. And then notice once I hit tab, it now then auto sequences those check numbers in that order. I believe I can go in here and edit these manually if I wish. Yeah. So right here I can come in here and go, okay, oops, I didn't mean to clear that out, 11567. And so I have, again, full control. So if I go, oh, they're not in exactly the number that they're listed here in that sequence, I can still go down and manually correct or change those numbers, okay? So we're going to assume these are right now. And now when I go to next, it now pops up and says, confirm new check numbers and click continue. Well, the most important part about this, of course, is over here on the right, there's a button that's checked that says, no, do not renumber checks. So when assuming I've checked these numbers and they're correct, I'd have to now go down and change it to yes, proceed with renumbering checks, with renumbering. So I change that to that button and I click continue, and it says transferring payroll data to accounting. So what it's actually doing is it's going into accounting, it's reversing those previous payment transactions and reposting over a new set of transactions into accounting with some new transaction numbers with those new check numbers. So notice it's kind of flashing the screen here. So what that's basically is doing is it's showing us that it's occurring for each one of our employees. So it might take an extra few seconds here. Maybe I shouldn't have done all 6 or 7, but hopefully it should be wrapping up here pretty quickly, hopefully. And so yeah, it's reversing the original transactions and reposting new ones with the check numbers for audit purposes, okay? Well, he said, sorry folks, I thought this would be quicker than this. There it is. All right, so it took a few seconds longer than I had hoped, but it says renumbering process was successfully completed, okay? So now when I go back into something like payroll and void individual pay, and I choose my March 31st date, it's showing a set of transactions in red, and it's now showing a new set of transactions in black, okay? So if I'm not mistaken now, I would probably also need to go into reports and accounting transfer audit report and reprint a new report for that, because there's going to be new transaction numbers that are now generated and created for those March 31st payroll entries, okay? But again, folks, you have full control of how that occurs, all right? So So I'm getting a question here. Does it matter if accounting is open when doing things in payroll, or should it be closed? Good question, Holly. No, it shouldn't matter. Church windows can be open. Absolutely, you can be in accounting. It should have no problems with writing those to the database, whether church windows or accounting is open or not. If there is, certainly please give us a call if you get an error, but in my experience, there should be no issues with it. Good question. All right, so the renumbering routine was covered on pages 38, 39, and 40. It does talk about on page 40 that when you go into your payroll and you go to your check register, and we go in here and we go, okay, we're going to enter our 3/31 date. Again, if you print the check register after running the renumber routine, you'll want to come in here and reprint this report and replace your old one with it, because it's now got new check numbers, okay? And of course, like I said, you may want to reprint the new transfer audit report over there to show the new transactions that have been created due to the reversals and reentry in accounting, okay? Our final portion of the topic is here under your page 41 that talks about verifying your FUTA and SUTA information. And what it's talking about is the federal unemployment and state unemployment rates in Church Windows Payroll. So how that's accessed is right here under data setup and tax rates and wage bases. So right here it shows, percent and wage base for Social Security and Medicare. Those are fixed figures. You can't change those, hence they're gray. Okay. So it does wind up being, 7.65 total for Social Security and Medicare, or 6.20 for Social Security and 1.45 for Medicare. Again, fixed amounts. Okay. Now what you do have control over is, FUTA or SUTA, but churches are exempt from FUTA tax, so there's nothing typically to edit here. They're exempt from that, okay? If your organization for any reason is not exempt, you can modify the fields, the settings in these fields if necessary. If subject to state unemployment tax, enter a percentage and a percentage in wage base. Right here under again, it defaults to state taxable wages only, because again, federal our churches are exempt from that, okay? And then once you've made the desired changes on here, you would simply click OK through that. And then I believe if you go up to your reports, you do have your quarterly FUTA and quarterly SUTA reports here that would help you determine what those actual amounts are, okay, for your, say, state unemployment tax, okay? Many churches are, of course, also exempt at the state level as well. It all depends on your state, okay? If you have questions or problems with that, please give us a call, but just want you to know where those would be checked or changed if applicable, okay? Right here under taxes, tax rates, and wage bases. All right, that is our topic, folks. Like I said, it didn't quite run the full 20 minutes today, but we hope that you find the event helpful.